What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2021 Volvo XC40 Recharge. So about the Recharge version of the XC40, well this is the fully electric version. Volvo keeps changing their names for what's a plug-in hybrid and what's a full electric and stuff, but this is the fully electric version of the XC40. And so the main giveaway that tells you this is an electric version is that blocked off front grille there that's body colored. So that is obviously because it doesn't have a gas engine, doesn't need all that cooling. So for better aerodynamics, better range, you block that off. And so anyway, up front there though, it's still very familiar XC40 in all the other ways, you know, same front bumper there, same headlights, which I really love that Thor's Hammer daytime running light that's there in the front. And I also really love this sage green color. Coming down to the sides here on the XC40, I also really love how much it stands out. It's actually a lot more distinctive than the run-of-the-mill SUV, which has a pretty ho-hum side profile usually. This really makes a statement, partially because of these larger 20-inch wheels that are optional. You can get smaller wheels if you don't want to pay extra for these and you want a little bit of better ride quality. I think that going down from these 20s would probably make sense, but the 20s certainly look cool. But another thing I really love is just how you have the two-tone effect here. So you have the black roof and you'll see it kind of blends into a little Recharge badge, which is very subtle there, but having that little badge is kind of cool. And also it's interesting, that rear door, how much it kicks up there and creates a little bit of a blind spot there, but you have the safety tech to help you out with that. But just it definitely makes a statement on the outside here once again. And then going out to the back there, you have, you know, pretty typical Volvo taillights. I love how they still have the vertical oriented taillights there on all these Volvos. And I think they look really good here on the XC40. And I also like how there's some curvature to the back end there. It's not just a flat hatch. You have, you know, some interesting dimensions there. And, you know, just a little P8 Recharge badge there on the back. But otherwise, you know, it's very subtle. If you don't know what to look for, this would totally blend in like a normal XC40, and people wouldn't even know you're driving an electric Volvo until they saw you drive away completely silently. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The Volvo XC40 Recharge here has this the typical Volvo key, but this time, strangely, all the Volvo keys, this is leather and these buttons on the side are metal. Instead on this, it's just plastic. And it feels a lot cheaper as a result, and that's kind of unfortunate because Volvo keys are some of the nicest in the industry in my opinion, and this really downgrades it. I'm not sure why they switched over here, at least for the XC40 Recharge, but anyway, it is keyless access, keyless entry, and so as far as starting the vehicle, there isn't even any ignition, of course, and so this is one of the few electric vehicles that tries to guess whenever you want to have it automatically turn on. So basically, anytime that you hop in the vehicle and it detects you in the seat, it will kick everything on automatically. There is actually no start button. So unlike, for example, the Volkswagen ID.4, which does the same thing, that still has a backup button you can press to start it up, whereas this does not. So it's kind of interesting. Thankfully though, the screen does come on even if the other doors are open. So if you want to, for example, have a passenger in here and still have the air conditioning going, but the driver isn't present, you can still have the infotainment system running with the air conditioning. And I believe with the parking setting, you can also pre-cool it so the rear seat occupants can still have air conditioning even if you leave the vehicle, hopefully. You know, so that's you know, just a little interesting touch there. But you know, it is very futuristic because you don't have to mess with any kind of startup thing. You just literally sit down and you just put it into drive and it goes. Also, if you're curious to hear more about the interior of the XC40, my wife and I actually just did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle, so I'll link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all our thoughts on this interior. Overall, it's not quite as luxurious as other Volvos. Then again, this is the entry-level model with the XC40, but you know, even this Recharge version though, it is almost $60,000, so it's not, you know, a cheap vehicle. But on the inside here, you know, you still do have some pretty high quality materials, and overall, you know, still for the type of vehicle this is, again, being electric and also being a luxury brand, I think the interior, you know, still certainly lives up to the Volvo expectations. All right, so setting off in the XC40 Recharge. So I think the first thing that I notice about this vehicle is that it's the most normal feeling electric vehicle I've ever driven. And what I mean by that is that it feels the most like a gasoline powered vehicle out of all the electric vehicles I've driven. So it's really interesting because aside from the fact that you're rolling around in silence, aside from hearing a very quiet little hum from the electric motors and the little hum that it emits outside to let people know you're coming, otherwise, you know, it feels very much like a normal gas XC40. XC40. First off, visibility is really good. You know, you have the same great visibility, nice thin A-pillars, great view forward, nice large view out of the sides, view out of the back is great, very easy to drive. It feels like a nice small car too, which is something you can't really say for most of the other electric vehicles, especially in the luxury segment, which a lot of them, you know, are kind of on the large side. So I like how compact this feels. It is really cool in that regard. Other things though, another thing that feels very normal, the brake pedal. A lot of other electric vehicles, you know, you have some kind of weirdness going on sometimes with the regenerative braking and stuff. This, it feels very predictable every single time, very normal. Throttle response is also much like a gas vehicle, where there's actually a decent amount of throttle travel before you start getting some good punch out of these electric motors, which is surprising because a lot of other electric vehicles, they especially like to play up the whole like it's immediate power. And so, you know, the second you dip into the gas on most other vehicles, you get a nice strong shove. It's never unpredictable in the other vehicles, but it's just like right there with like nice punchy power. And this, I mean, I gotta push my foot down probably at least twice as much, maybe even 3 times as much in this to get the same amount of forward momentum as I got in, for example, a Mustang Mach-E or even the Volkswagen ID.4. So it means that, you know, if you're someone who's used to other electric vehicles, this is going to feel kind of slow right off the bat, because you're going to be like, oh man, like where's those electric motors? And it's just like you just have to really go for it in order to get that, you know, thing to fully commit and take off on you here. But I mean, it's also insanely quiet in here. It's really impressive. Just, I mean, you don't hear very much of the outside at all. And even on these 20-inch wheels, you know, it's a pretty nice smooth ride so far. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and do an acceleration here. There's no drive modes here, so you can't put in any kind of sport mode or anything like you get in other Volvos. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. Oh, that is immediate. Wow. Woo, this thing, jeez, it takes off. It is quick, and wow, yeah, you put your foot to the floor and it gets out of the way. Wow, it is strong power out of these electric motors. This little thing is a hot rod, and that's the thing. I think this is one of the coolest sleepers I've ever seen as far as cars go, where I mean, you can smoke most affordable sports cars on the road with this thing and they would have no clue what hit them. So this thing runs 2 electric motors, one in the front, one in the rear for all-wheel drive, and it does 402 horsepower and 486 pound-feet of torque in this little cute XC40. It's hilarious. So 0 to 60 time is 4.3 seconds. That's what I mean. From a red light, this will destroy all those muscle cars. This will destroy, you know, all that kind of stuff pretty easily, especially since it's all-wheel drive and it's instant with the electric motors. There's no shifting, there's no wheel spin, there's no nothing. It just goes. See, even the average person can do that 4.3 seconds 0 to 60. You don't have to be a race car driver or some expert journalist in order to get those types of times. It's very, very impressive just how punchy it is. And it's almost addicting because it's just like deceptively fast. I mean, oh man. Honestly, I think it's kind of overkill. I'm not sure why they thought that an XC40 buyer would ever need 402 horsepower. It is certainly overkill, but I guess the way they have these electric motors, if they wanted all-wheel drive, they got to use 2 of them, and they only do 200 horsepower or so each, and so it's just you either have front-wheel drive, which you can't even get on these here, at least in the States, or you just have the all-wheel drive. So it's kind of funny, but hey, I welcome it. As an enthusiast, 400 horsepower and something like this is hilarious fun, and I love it. Anyway, we're coming up some corners here. Let's see how the XC40 handles here. So, it does okay. Now, you know, for a vehicle that is a normal gasoline-powered platform that then has been converted to electric like this one has, your center of gravity is going to be a little bit higher than what you get in a purpose-built EV. And these are heavy. This little thing weighs almost 4,800 pounds. But thankfully, I mean, you have plenty of grip from these Pirelli Scorpion Zero tires. They're 235 wide all around, so they're not super wide. They did that, of course, for the better range for the electric motors and stuff. But, I mean, it still has decent amounts of grip there. I think partially this one also feels a little more stout in the handling department because we have the 20-inch wheels with the lower profile sidewalls there. If you had, you know, the taller sidewalls on the smaller wheels, you know, that would probably feel a little more squirmy than this does. But this thing feels pretty sharp. You do feel the weight for sure. There's no hiding that. But it actually has fairly high limits, so I don't feel like it's going to just start understeering like crazy or anything. It feels very confidence inspiring. So I mean, you know, even right now I'm probably driving this thing more aggressively than most people who buy an XC40 will. But just know that, you know, it gives you confident handling even whenever you are on a tight, windy back road. As far as all the battery specs and stuff, it runs a 75 kilowatt hour battery, and so it has a quoted range by the EPA of 208 miles of range, which isn't very much. And it doesn't help that in the gauge cluster here, it doesn't actually even show you how many miles you have until the battery's dead. It just has a percentage gauge there for the battery. So it just says, like, I'm at 89% right now. That's all I know. I have no clue how far 89% will take me. It only tells you mileage whenever you get below 30 miles of range. Then it'll tell you exactly how many miles you have left for whenever you're really eking out, you know, the last few miles out of that battery, which is, I think, I don't know why it doesn't show you the mileage. This is the first electric vehicle that has not shown me a mileage rating, and I think that that is a very important thing that you need to have, and so not having that isn't great. Thankfully, it does recharge pretty quickly though, so you can get an 80% charge on a 150 kilowatt charger in just 40 minutes. So, you know, pretty quick turnaround time there if you can find a 150, you know, kilowatt charger. So, I mean, but that's not bad, because that means that's your average, you know, longish lunch break, and you can be back to an 80% charge. Obviously, it's an 80% charge because you only have 208 miles of range to work with, but still, you know, even with that smaller battery pack, that's, you know, pretty good recharge times. So that certainly will help you on a road trip, even if you can't, you know, do a super long amount of range out of this battery. And, you know, we're on a little bit of a rougher road here now, but it's still, you know, is pretty smooth and, you know, pretty refined. Merging onto the highway here. Just takes off. Oh man, and yeah, we were already at highway speed, so that's when I stopped accelerating. But anyway, and I love how the nose really lifts up on this thing, and it gives you an extreme experience. So if you're someone who, you know, is looking for something like a Tesla experience, you know, this is going to give you that performance, you know, acceleration that, you know, you would expect out of a Tesla performance model almost. It's not quite as fast as those, like a Model Y performance is, but it's not far off. And yeah, it's just very, very impressive. But anyway, so this car is also equipped with the ProPilot Assist system, which is optional here on these as part of an advanced package that this one has. So we're gonna go ahead and set that. And part of the highway here, on the shoulder side of the road there, the lane marking wasn't even there, and it still had no problem staying right square center in the lane. We're going around a gentle corner here now, and it does do the steering assist here for you. You still do have to keep your hands on the wheel and still be doing the steering. It will be checking to make sure you're applying steering effort every once in a while. But it does a really good job. I think Volvo has one of the best adaptive cruise systems out there, just because, like, their system never loses track of the road lines. At least in my experience, they always lock onto those road lines, and it's the kind of system you actually can relax a little bit with. A lot of the others, you kind of got to babysit them still. They're not perfect. They'll randomly lose track of the road lines and not notify you, and then you'll just be like, oh wait, it's not helping me steer anymore. I have to continue to steer myself. Again, all of these systems are still hands-on, aside from Cadillac Super Cruise. But, you know, still, it's just the fact that this does a really good job of still keeping everything in your lane. You can still just kind of rely on the system to help you a little bit more, even if you are still paying attention and doing stuff. You know, it does make most of those micro corrections for you, and so it does actually help you to relax a little bit with this system. But anyway, thanks to Volvo, I'm going to have the XC40 Recharge here for another week here, so I'm going to be driving all over the place, and then I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world efficiency here as far as how efficiently it's using that electric range, and also I'll come back and give you guys any other thoughts that I have here during my week of driving, and my thoughts on how it compares to its competitors, and, you know, the pricing and all those details. Alright, so I've been driving the Volvo XC40 Recharge for about a week now, and it's a really nice thing to drive. I've put 103 miles on it here in my week, and I just really enjoy it. I think the thing that I really am enjoying the most is the power, which I wasn't expecting. I knew this thing had, you know, over 400 horsepower and stuff. I just expected it to be less exciting than it is. Again, I have plenty of experience with other electric vehicles, but I was just surprised. I mean, this little thing is just, it's so much fun to just shock everyone around you by just taking off in this thing. And it honestly put a smile on my face a lot. And it's actually faster than a regular Mustang Mach-E, for example, and stuff like that. I mean, it is punchy. So it's really kind of funny because obviously they're not marketing this vehicle as any kind of performance version. I really love it kind of in that context. context of like it being one of those like performance SUVs like you see from the AMG brands and the M brands. This is like Volvo doing that, but electric. And I think in that, you know, a mindset, they're really ahead of the curve with this, with having tons of power, even though, again, maybe the average consumer doesn't need 400 horsepower and they're like, they don't want something that's powerful. But if you are someone who, you know, likes your GLC 43s or your BMW X3 M40i's, things like that, but you're thinking about going electric, I think this would be actually filling that, you know, niche of something that's super performance oriented, very, very fast, but still, you know, it has the SUV form factor and stuff. And anyway, I just really have enjoyed this thing a lot more than I even was expecting to. And so, I mean, there were a few little things I didn't love. So for example, this whole infotainment system I'm still not crazy about, and you can go watch the interior review with Beth and I where we talk more about all the pros and cons of this infotainment system. I'm not going to go into all that here in this video. But one thing that actually happened after we filmed the interior review was that the Bluetooth mic just quit working. And not sure why, I couldn't find any way to fix it. But this whole system, I'm still not in love with the way they set things up. Like, for example, there's no actual EV sub-menu, so there's no way to really geek out on any of the numbers as far as the electric performance and stuff, which I'll get to the efficiency in a minute. That's another interesting thing. But there's no, you know, if you're someone who's really into electric vehicles, there's not a whole lot here to really play around with. And so, actually, one funny thing, so one thing I didn't talk about earlier in the video was the one-pedal drive mode. So I didn't have the one-pedal mode on, and I spent most of the week just driving around, and it just felt very normal because you had no regen, basically. It was just, you know, hitting the brakes to slow down like any other normal gas car, I should say. And so it wasn't until I actually dug through this menu, like 2 days before the end of this loan here, that I was like, oh wait, there's a one-pedal drive mode. Let's try that out. So, I mean, they really bury even that into a sub-menu, and there's even a toggle you can make the steering heavier, but it's like, instead of just doing a drive mode like every single other car company, and Volvo included, they have drive modes in other Volvos, in this, it's like buried in like 5 taps away in a sub-menu. It's not great with the way they have that set up. I know they want to keep everything clean and simple here on the front, but, you know, things like one pedal mode, you think you might want to use that. Maybe that's a set it and forget it kind of thing for most people. But I just kind of wish that, you know, it wasn't so much buried in there. Because honestly, if I hadn't gone and poked through all the different settings in this vehicle, I wouldn't have even known it had a one pedal mode, period. It's just kind of crazy. As far as the one pedal mode goes, whenever I did try it, I, again, didn't do a ton of driving with it because I didn't know it existed. But it seemed to work pretty well. I will say it's a little aggressive with the braking at the very first moment you let off of the gas. I wish it was a little bit smoothed out a little bit more. It's not bad. I think if I had more practice, I would get smoother with it, but as it was, I found myself almost making myself car sick with the fact that I wasn't being totally smooth coming off of the gas as much as I needed to be, and so it was really slowing down a lot and going back and forth, back and forth. Not as easy to use as the Mustang Mach-E. That one pedal mode, I think, is personally my favorite out of all the electric vehicles I've tested. It was very easy to use. It didn't make me sick, even if I didn't have a perfectly fine-tuned throttle input, and was just really nice. So, you know, this isn't bad though. It is a pretty good regen. I mean, I was even going down a pretty steep hill and I let off the gas and it came to a full stop. So it is a full-blown actual regen where you can do truly one pedal driving, which is something that like Volkswagen, for example, claims with the ID4, but in reality, it still rolls and will not really come to a stop. So this is a true one pedal mode, so I commend Volvo for that. I just think it needs a little bit of fine tuning or a little bit of driver adjustment of just getting a little more practice to be better with it. But really great that it has that. But yeah, that's really all of my other impressions. The last two things to mention here are the actual efficiency of this vehicle and the pricing. So as far as efficiency goes, so this is claiming 37 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. Keep in mind it has a 75 kilowatt hour battery, which just, you know, kind of checks out because, you know, it means we're basically sitting at, you know, right around that 208 rating for this vehicle, and I'll get more to that in a second as well. But that is impressive considering these are only rated at 43 kilowatt hours per 100 miles, which would actually, you know, make it a good bit less efficient than all the other competitors as you can see here with the EPA's ratings. But in the real world, actually getting closer to the Mach-E's efficiency there of 37 kilowatt hours, that does a slightly better 36, but still not bad considering it's a vehicle that wasn't built from the ground up to be an electric vehicle. It was a gas vehicle then converted to this electric thing here for the Recharge version. And so I gotta say that the efficiency is pretty commendable considering the aerodynamics aren't going to be as good as all those other vehicles and stuff. Now, it still pales in comparison with the Tesla Model Y, for example, which is the range all-star here and has the best efficiency there of 125 mpge combined. But still, all things considered, I think the Volvo actually does pretty good as far as efficiency goes. And it also is important to note that it might have slightly better efficiency in the wintertime because you do have a heat pump as an option in the Volvo. That's something you cannot get in the Mach-E, but the Tesla does offer a heat pump, as does like the Audi Q4 e-tron. So, those are going to be doing a little bit better in the wintertime over the Mach-E, for example. So just one other little thing to keep in mind. So I'd say that overall Volvo has done pretty well with the efficiency here. One thing that is worth noting is the 208 range is with 100% full battery, but Volvo does recommend you only charge the battery to 90% most of the time. So effectively that gives you like 193 miles of range or so if you actually want to keep the battery in good health. Now, clearly you have that 100%, and if you're going on a road trip and you need every one of those 208 miles, top it off and get the full 208, you can do that. And it's nice to give you that flexibility. For the average commuter, you don't need to have 200 miles of range even at that, so I think it's totally fine to charge it to 90% or whatever, and you'll have plenty to do all your errands every single day. I mean, this isn't the ideal road trip vehicle, but again, if you are considering one of these, you probably have already seen the 208 range number and that hasn't scared you off. A lot of people, they're like, oh, I need 250 or 300 miles of range. If you're open to this in the 208, then chances are, it's not going to bother you too much if it's a little bit lower than that. But, I think as a commuter vehicle or something, this is really great. And I mean, since you can, do the DC fast charging pretty quickly, it does work as a road trip vehicle. You just stop maybe a little more frequently than you would in some of the other electric stuff. But, you can still totally do it just fine. And then the last thing to mention, though, is the pricing here of the XC40 Recharge. So that is another uphill battle here for the Volvo, unfortunately, because these start around $55,000, and then as tested, this one here is sitting right under 60 grand. It's like 59 and change. Now this has the advanced pack. This also has the climate pack, and so those two packages are really what put it up over the top there. And so, that's really the tough thing as well, because if you're spending almost 60 grand on a Mustang Mach-E, yes, you get a little bit less performance than that unless you go for the GT version, which will actually be slightly over 60, so that is a little bit extra money. But even if you go for a regular Mach-E, it's only a couple milliseconds slower 0 to 60, but you get way more range. That Mach-E will do 270 miles of range with the all-wheel drive version for about 57,000. It still kind of undercuts this, and that is again for a premium trim, which has a bunch of bells and whistles and stuff like this has. So even then, the Mach-E kind of undercuts this. And the Mach-E is still actually my favorite vehicle in this segment, actually. The Tesla Model Y is also another very strong competitor in this segment, although they do continue to keep rising in price. But as of the time I'm editing this video here, you can get one for about $57,000 in its cheapest form. And so that does put it right around where the Volvo sits pricing-wise. And, you do get way more range here, 330 miles of range in the Model Y. So, I mean, almost basically 100 more miles of range than that Volvo, and so that is one thing to note. And it's also going to have a little bit more space. You have a frunk there that's nice and large in the Model Y, so it does have a few strong perks to the Model Y, so that is another one to consider. But if you do want the autopilot system with the full self-driving thing in the Tesla, that will be a hefty $10,000 upcharge versus in the Volvo you get the ProPilot Assist, which does still require you to have your hands on the wheel, but another very solid system that you do get even at that $57,000 or $58,000 price point. So I mean, clearly the Volvo here at 208 is going to be really paling in comparison whenever it comes to how much range you get per dollar. And if that's something that's important to you, clearly this is going to be trailing those by a lot. If you are okay with a smaller luxury EV, though, I will say this compares pretty favorably with like the Audi e-tron, which is a lot more expensive. It doesn't really give you much more range. Also, you have like the Jaguar I-Pace, which also a lot more expensive, not really much more range. I mean, they do a little bit more, but I mean, they're so much more expensive, and I don't know in those vehicles if you get much more value out of those. So I think that, you know, if you are looking at those, this might actually kind of make a lot of sense. Again, especially if you're okay with the small size. So, you know, it's not all bad as far as the comparisons go. It just depends on what you compare it to. But again, just with some of the newest stuff out there, you know, if the Mach-E and again, just the stuff from Tesla, it's tough to beat. And then also just the fact that, you know, you still have Alcantara seats here at almost $60,000. You don't even have full leather, and it's not a huge vehicle either. So, you know, all the other competitors this competes with do have more space. They have bigger frunks, but as it is right now, this is an excellent first attempt. And I think, again, it could make a lot of sense depending on your situation. But I think for a lot of people, it's just not enough range and too much money, and, you know, not enough other features. Like, again, no wireless CarPlay, things like that. It kind of makes it a little bit of a tough sell for some people, unfortunately, which is a shame, because like I said, it's a really great little car. It's an absolute blast. I just love those accelerations. But anyway, that's it as far as all of my thoughts here on the XC40 Recharge. Let me know your thoughts on in the comments below. Huge thanks to Volvo for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.